If you have someone in your life that's always talking about cars and you never know what they're talking about, this video is for you. This is an engine block. It's a big block of steel that makes up most of the engine. It has holes in it, and those holes are cylindrical in shape. This one has 6 holes. That means it's a 6-cylinder. All of those cylinders are in a straight line. That means that it's an inline engine. So you'll hear this referred to as a 6-cylinder inline, or an inline 6, or a straight 6. This is also an engine block. It also has 6 cylinders, but these ones aren't in a straight line. These ones make a V shape. So this is a V6. A V6 is a pretty standard engine. A V8 is going to be for a very powerful vehicle. The inline 6 doesn't vibrate as much, so it tends to be for a smoother ride on higher end sporty vehicles, as opposed to our Prius, which has an inline 4-cylinder, which is a much less powerful engine. There are other engine shapes, but these are the 2 most common. Those cylinder holes essentially work like one of these, that they have a plunger that goes in and out, and that plunger is called a piston. The vehicle uses gasoline to cause tiny explosions that make that piston go in and out, and the engine converts that back and forth motion to a spinning motion. The engine spins all kinds of things, mainly the tires, but there are a lot of other things that it spins using what's called a serpentine belt. It's called that because it kind of goes through the engine compartment like a snake. If you ever have a vehicle and it starts making that sound, that's usually the serpentine belt going out. These are cheap and not really that difficult to replace depending on the vehicle. It spins fans and pumps and anything that might need to be spinned around. One of the things that it spins is the alternator. The alternator is like an electric motor, but instead of using electricity to create a spinning motion, it's using a spinning motion to create electricity. It takes kinetic energy from the engine and turns it into an alternate form of energy, electricity. That's not why it's called an alternator, but it might help you remember. The electricity from the alternator charges your battery and helps electricity things run. Another very important part of a vehicle is the transmission. If you were going to go on a mission to Mars, you would need a rocket ship, which is exactly what a transmission looks like. This is full of gears and stuff, but it pretty much does the same thing that this does on a bicycle. It changes gears. When these break, it's very bad and very expensive. Unless you are very passionate about cars, you're not going to work on this yourself. And if you're like me and you buy old cheap vehicles, it's not worth it to fix it. Between the back 2 tires, there is an axle. And in the middle of that axle, there is this thing. That is called the rear differential. When a vehicle goes around a turn, the 2 back tires need to spin at different speeds. This has gears in it that allows them to do that. The differential, different speeds. That thing is full of lubricant. And the number 1 problem that it has is that it will leak and then it needs to be fixed. Now the front tires are held on by a bunch of rods and stuff. These have various names like control arm and tie rod and anti-roll bar and ball joint. Any kind of bar or joint or rod is probably one of these parts. These are what connect the front wheels to the car. They suspend the car in the front, so they're called the front suspension. So if you hear someone talk about rebuilding the front suspension, this is what they're talking about. When we look at the bottom of a car, we have the engine compartment in the front, and then we have these pipes that go along the undercarriage and come out the back. The engine creates bad, toxic air called exhaust, and that exhaust is put through these pipes. It's like the farts of the vehicle. And the first thing it's going to do is go through what's called a catalytic converter. Sometimes people will call it a CAT. Catalytic converters take pollutants out of the air. They're like filters. They make the exhaust less toxic and less terrible for the environment. They are also full of very expensive metals, so people tend to steal them. After the catalytic converter, you have the muffler here near the rear. The muffler is like a silencer. It takes all the noise from the engine and it makes it quieter. If you get a hole in this pipe anywhere before the muffler, it's going to make the car really loud. Sometimes people will do this on purpose. They'll take the muffler out and just have a pipe that comes out the back. But when you do hear someone with a really loud vehicle, don't assume that they just bypassed the muffler. They might have had their catalytic converter stolen, and that sucks. And another thing you might hear car people talk about is chasing gremlins or chasing ghosts. That means there is an electrical problem in the car, but they can't figure out what it is. Vehicles have wires going everywhere. And any one of those wires becoming severed or coming loose can cause all kinds of problems in the car. Sometimes finding which wire has the problem is very time consuming. So those little electrical glitches are called gremlins or ghosts. So if you have a friend who is chasing gremlins in their vehicle, they're having a bad day. It's really frustrating. When other parts break, like, you know what the problem is, but that sucks. So hopefully this helps you understand a little bit more about what's going on in your vehicle.